Death taxes are once again in the spotlight, with the Productivity Commission urging the federal government to consider the controversial policy. It said an inheritance tax would bolster the government revenue and address growing income and wealth inequality. But will it? Joining us is Estate and Trust Taxation Specialist and Chair of STEP Australia, Ian Raspin. Good afternoon to you, Ian.
Afternoon, Monica. Great to join you.
What exactly is an inheritance tax or a death tax?
Great question. Effectively, they're a tax that's payable upon death of a person. A death tax or an estate tax would be triggered upon the date of death and against the estate. An inheritance tax, ironically, would actually generally be charged against the beneficiary of the estate. But it's all around the inter-wealth transfer of assets.
All right, and what assets would be included?
So it really comes down to, what the regulators really put into place, but typically you'd sort of see it to be the assets of the deceased that they personally owned. Family home, unless that was exempt, other properties, share portfolios, etc. But often will not include things that are held in trusts and other vehicles that, very wealthy people may set up to control or maintain their assets.
How much would it raise for the government?
Look, that's again really comes down to the actual rules that the government put into place here. But I will say on that particular cost here, if you start looking across the OECD countries, many countries, in fact, there's been 13 countries since the year 2000 that have actually walked away from death and inheritance taxes because administratively it's just too costly to actually administer.
There's also a growing pot of cash in the hands of older Australians. I mean, how would a death tax impact the nation's largest intergenerational transfer of wealth?
Again, it'd come down to who it actually levies against, but you'll generally find that these sort of taxes have an exemption for lower estates, and so many estates would be carved out, as would be spousal sort of transfers. But so it'd be the higher end estates that are generally taxed, but again, a lot of those may look to move that money into other pots.
Ian, viewers are overwhelmingly against the idea. Lisa Meyer asks, is this a joke? Now, Australia is actually just one of the only countries that doesn't have an inheritance tax. You mentioned, though, that others are moving away from it. But how inevitable is it, do you think, that we will end up with it to some degree?
Well, yeah, many countries are moving away from it, particularly in the OECD community. But look, I think it's something that's been tabled many times by both parties across Australia. It is a discussion that does need to be had. But at the same token, I'd be saying that there are other mediums of taxes that would be far more beneficial. Lift GST up a couple of points. Look at some of the loopholes that we have in the systems or areas where things are falling through. It'll be discussed. I don't think politically it'd be very tenable for a lot of the country to be able to move this one forward.
Barbara Koifik writes, of all the taxes, death tax is the most disgusting. Can you see anybody being brave enough to bring it in? I mean, even the Productivity Commission's called it political dynamite.
I think it's very much a political agenda, but I don't see anybody being able to really bring this in.
Graham Winter writes, don't care and I won't pay it. Would anyone be exempt from the tax?
Yeah, so generally you'd find a spouse would be exempt, so that one spouse passes, the money could or the assets could transfer to the other spouse. Lower end estates, there was a threshold thrown around a while ago of about $650,000. You go to the UK, different thresholds. The US at the moment, I think, have a $15 million threshold. So it's about really taxing, and that's going to drop, Monica, in 2024. But it's really about taxing the higher echelon of society.
Don Julio says, happy to pay it, but then I'm not going to give $1 for income tax.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess that's, appreciate the comment, but I mean, the government tax is all about being able to provide hospitals and roads and militaries and looking after those in need. And so I think that's the very purpose, isn't it? The reason for raising or having taxes in Australia is to be able to afford that. And with our ageing demographic and the housing problem, we need taxes. But it's about having smart taxes, getting the right tax policy in a place that's taxing the right people without putting onus on people that really can't afford that level of tax.
Alan Hill suggests make sure the top end of town, millionaires, corporate companies are paying their fair share of taxes, then problem solved. Who would bear the brunt of an income or an estate tax? Because many say it wouldn't be the rich.
I agree with you, and I go back to what I sort of said earlier, that the rich and the wealthy have the ability to pay for professional advice. And it's demonstrated around the world where those sort of people with those fortunate circumstances are able to restructure. So it really, a lot of people may find a way around this, which again is where the administrative costs come in. And Look, I think that's the other point. You know, these sort of regimes also require a gifting tax so that people don't gift everything away before they pass away as well.
Finally, from Katrine Gardner, who writes, why penalise our children with this when they're the ones who will inherit when we've passed away? Being on a pension means I don't have much to leave them, and that will just add to their grief. It really has been slammed as a tax on love, hasn't it?
Yes, I think that's right. But again, I'd say to your viewer there that if she's on the pension, she would probably be exempt from these sort of taxes. It's not going to be aimed at those sort of people. And again, I'd reiterate that it's really, I think, there's better taxes and tax policy that could be looked at without significant administrative burden onto the Australian tax system, and we could generate more money to be able to pay for those things.
Estate and Trust Taxation Specialist Ian Raspin, appreciate your time this afternoon.
Thank you very much, Monica.